Last Christmas, I was stirring hot chocolate in my mother's kitchen, watching snow fall through the window while wrapping gifts for my nieces and nephews. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine, and I remember feeling this warm anticipation about our annual family gathering. Sure, this year had been challenging with losing my job 8 months ago, but family was supposed to be your safe haven, right? I had just finished tying ribbons when my phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen, and I answered with a smile, expecting to discuss Christmas dinner plans. Little did I know that this call would shatter everything I believed about unconditional love and blood bonds. Trua kitoy ke chokats banding kwok goi jo jantai, joy moi tunhu de now hai. Chotoy biet kas banjang, theo doi tu ten for now. Vajung quen han. Like new cats ban kong tung kon hung. Kiniem giang sin. Jang hovoi gia jen. Subscribe de kong. Bolon hung kauchuyen visuk manchua long kien kwong hai. David's voice sounded different when he picked up, lacking his usual warmth and confidence. Hey, Miranda, he began hesitantly. I need to talk to you about Christmas Eve. I leaned against my kitchen counter, still in that happy bubble, assuming he was calling about gift exchanges or who was bringing what dish. Of course, I replied cheerfully. I was actually thinking about making my famous apple pie this year. Remember how everyone raved about it last time? The silence that followed should have been my first warning. David cleared his throat, and when he spoke again, his words came out carefully measured. Well, that's actually what I need to discuss. Mom and I have been talking, and we have decided to keep things smaller this year. More intimate. I felt my stomach flutter with confusion. Smaller. Our family Christmas had always been the same 8 people for the past 15 years. What do you mean smaller? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. David paused again, and I could hear him take a deep breath. Miranda, the thing is, Mom thinks it would be better if you sit this one out this year. The words hit me like ice water. I actually had to sit down, my legs suddenly feeling weak. Sit it out, I repeated slowly, not quite processing what I was hearing. David, what are you talking about? It's Christmas. It is our family Christmas. My brother's discomfort was palpable through the phone. He started explaining in a rush as if getting it out faster would make it hurt less. Look, everyone has been feeling a bit uncomfortable lately. You have been going through a rough patch with the job situation, and it has been 8 months now. Remember last Easter when you had to borrow money for gas to get home, and Thanksgiving when you could not contribute to the meal? Each word felt like a slap. I remembered those moments differently. I thought I had been quietly struggling while still showing up for family, still bringing love and laughter, even if I could not bring expensive wine or elaborate gifts. David. I started, my voice shaking slightly. I never asked for handouts. I just wanted to be with my family. But he was not finished. He continued listing grievances I never knew existed. Jessica mentioned how awkward it was when her kids asked why Aunt Miranda did not bring them the usual big presents. And Kyle said it brings down the whole mood when someone is obviously struggling financially. Mom said the holidays should be about celebration and joy, not about feeling sorry for people. I felt like I was listening to strangers talk about someone I did not recognize. Was this really how they saw me? Not as their sister and daughter going through a temporary setback, but as a burden, a source of discomfort at their perfect holiday table. Then David delivered the final blow. Miranda, Christmas is a time for success and celebration. It is no place for losers right now. The words hung in the air between us like poison. Losers. My own brother had just called me a loser. The same brother who I'd helped through his divorce 3 years ago, lending him money I could not afford, and letting him sleep on my couch for 6 weeks. I sat in my kitchen staring at the half-wrapped gifts on my table, feeling something fundamental break inside my chest. David tried to soften it with follow-up words. Look, when you get back on your feet, when things turn around for you, we will be here. This is just temporary. You understand, right? But I did understand. I understood perfectly. They were not just uninviting me from Christmas. They were telling me I was not good enough for them anymore, that my worth as a family member was directly tied to my bank account and employment status. That love in their eyes was conditional on success. Instead of screaming or crying or begging like part of me wanted to, I found myself speaking with a calmness that surprised even me. You know what, David? You are absolutely right. I completely agree. I could hear the relief in his voice when he replied, Really, I knew you would understand. You always were the reasonable one. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my apartment, looking around at the Christmas decorations I'd put up with such hope just weeks before. But instead of devastation, I felt something else beginning to grow inside me, something that felt a lot like freedom. The first thing I did after David's call was reach out to my friend Sarah, who had always been close to my family and often attended our gatherings. Sarah had this way of knowing everything that was happening in our social circle, and I needed to understand if this decision was as sudden as it seemed or if there had been conversations I was not privy to. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me, I said when she answered. Did you know that my family was planning to exclude me from Christmas? The pause that followed told me everything I needed to know before she even spoke. Oh, honey, Sarah said softly. I was wondering when they were going to tell you. Your mom called me about 3 weeks ago, asking if I thought it was a good idea. She said the family had been discussing what to do about your situation. My situation. As if being temporarily unemployed was some kind of contagious disease. Sarah continued, her voice growing more uncomfortable. Miranda, she said something about not wanting her successful children to feel awkward around failure. Those were her actual words. She talked about how Christmas should be a time when everyone can feel proud and accomplished, and that having you there would cast a shadow over the celebration. I felt my hands trembling as I gripped the phone. What else did she say? Sarah hesitated, but I pressed her. Please, I need to know everything. She mentioned that you had been borrowing money and that it made everyone uncomfortable. She said Jessica was worried about explaining your situation to her children, that it would ruin their image of adulthood and success. Your mom also said she had been talking to Mrs. Patterson next door, and apparently she had advised your mother that sometimes tough love means excluding people until they get their act together. The picture was becoming clearer and more devastating with each detail. This was not a spontaneous decision or even a reluctant choice. This was a calculated exclusion that had been discussed, planned, and justified among multiple family members and even neighbors. I had been the topic of conversations where my worth was debated and ultimately found lacking. But Sarah was not done. There's something else, Miranda. I happened to drive by your mom's house yesterday, and I saw Jessica and Kyle there decorating. They are definitely still having the full Christmas celebration. They just did not want you there. That was when something shifted inside me. The hurt began transforming into something else entirely. I thanked Sarah for her honesty and hung up, but instead of wallowing, I found myself opening my laptop and doing something I had not done in months, investigating my own family. If they were going to judge me based on financial success and life stability, I decided it was time to take a real look at how successful they actually were. I started with David scrolling through his social media posts that always showed expensive dinners, new gadgets, and luxury vacations. But when I dug deeper using professional networking sites and public records, I could access through the library, a different picture emerged. David had taken out a second mortgage on his house 6 months ago. His business was being sued by 2 former clients for breach of contract. The expensive lifestyle he was broadcasting was apparently funded by credit and borrowed money. My successful brother was actually drowning in debt while maintaining a facade of prosperity. Jessica's social media painted a picture of a happy divorced mother thriving in her independence. But when I contacted a mutual friend who worked at her company, I learned that Jessica had been demoted after the divorce affected her work performance. She was barely making her rent and had moved in with our mother temporarily, though she was hiding this from the extended family and friends. Kyle, our youngest brother, had been posting pictures from college parties and talking about his exciting junior year. But a simple call to the university's student services claiming to be his sister, wanting to send a care package, revealed that Kyle had dropped out 2 months ago and had not told anyone in the family. He was working at a fast food restaurant while lying to everyone about his continued education. Even Mark, Jessica's ex-husband, who somehow still got invited to family events, was not the successful businessman everyone believed him to be. A quick search revealed he was being audited by the IRS and facing potential charges for tax evasion. As I compiled this information, I realized something profound. I was probably the most financially stable person in my family right now. Yes, I was unemployed, but I had savings from selling my house the previous year. I had no debt, no legal troubles, and no elaborate lies to maintain. While they were all drowning in various forms of chaos, they had convinced themselves that I was the family failure. The irony was not lost on me. They were excluding me for being a loser, while they were all losing in their own ways, just with better marketing and more elaborate deceptions. But instead of feeling vindictive, I felt something else, pity. And then, determination. I realized that I did not want to be part of a family that valued appearance over authenticity, that chose exclusion over support, and that measured love in dollar signs. But more than that, I realized I had an opportunity to show them what real success looked like, what genuine celebration meant, and what family could be when it was chosen rather than assigned. I started making phone calls, but not to plead for reinstatement to their Christmas table. Instead, I began planning my own celebration, one that would honor the true spirit of the season and show me what I'd been missing while trying so hard to fit into their narrow definition of worthiness. The first person I called was Mrs. Thompson, my 82-year-old neighbor, who lived alone in the apartment across the hall. I had been bringing her groceries occasionally and checking on her during the winter months, but I'd never thought to include her in my holiday plans before. When I knocked on her door that Tuesday afternoon, she opened it with her usual warm smile, though I could see the loneliness in her eyes that she always tried to hide. "Mrs. Thompson," I said, "would you like to have Christmas Eve dinner with me? I'm planning something special, and I would love your company." The way her face lit up told me everything I needed to know about how she usually spent the holidays. She accepted immediately, asking if she could bring her famous sugar cookies and offering to help with the cooking. Next, I reached out to Jake, a former colleague who I knew was going through a difficult divorce. His ex-wife had moved across the country with their 8-year-old daughter, and this would be his first Christmas without Emma. When I called him, he sounded surprised but grateful for the invitation. "Miranda, you have no idea how much this means to me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I was dreading spending Christmas Eve alone thinking about Emma opening presents without me. I also contacted Maria, a 22-year-old college student, who cleaned offices in my building during her off hours. She was working her way through school while sending money back to her family in Honduras, which meant she could not afford to visit them for the holidays. Maria spoke with such gratitude when I invited her that it made my heart ache for all the times I'd taken family gatherings for granted. Tim and Lucy were a young couple who had moved to our city just 3 months earlier for Tim's new job. They were both from small towns on the East Coast and knew absolutely no one here. I had met them in the laundry room of our building, and they had mentioned how homesick they were feeling, especially with the holidays approaching. When I invited them, Lucy actually started crying with relief. As Christmas Eve approached, I threw myself into preparation. With more enthusiasm than I had felt in months, I planned a menu that was ambitious but manageable: honey-glazed ham, roasted vegetables with herbs from the small garden I kept on my balcony, homemade rolls, green bean casserole, and 3 different desserts. The cooking gave me something to focus on besides the ache of missing my family tradition. I decorated my small apartment with every Christmas decoration I owned, plus some evergreen branches I gathered from the park nearby. I set my dining table with the good china I had inherited from my grandmother, adding candles and small handmade place cards for each guest. The apartment had never looked more beautiful or felt more like home. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow falling outside my windows. Mrs. Thompson was the first to arrive, carrying a plate of her sugar cookies and wearing a red dress that she told me she had not had occasion to wear in 3 years. Jake came next, bringing a bottle of wine and a genuine smile I had not seen on his face in months. Maria arrived with a traditional Honduran dessert called tres leches cake, excited to share something from her culture. Tim and Lucy brought flowers and their infectious energy, constantly thanking me for including them. What happened next was something I had never experienced in all my years of family Christmas celebrations. Real conversation began flowing immediately. Mrs. Thompson told us about the Christmas Eve in 1958 when her late husband proposed to her in front of the tree at Rockefeller Center. Jake shared stories about his daughter Emma's Christmas traditions and showed us pictures of the dollhouse he had shipped to her. Maria taught us phrases in Spanish while describing Christmas celebrations in her hometown. Tim and Lucy talked about their decision to move across the country for love and opportunity, and how scary but exciting it was to build a new life together. The conversation was genuine, vulnerable, and filled with the kind of authentic connection that I realized had been missing from my family gatherings for years. As we sat around my table sharing our meal, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine or the fireplace. These people were not performing success or competing with each other. They were simply being human, sharing their stories, their struggles, and their hopes. This was what Christmas was supposed to feel like. Just as we were finishing dinner, my phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment I considered not answering. But something made me pick up, maybe curiosity about what could be so important that he would call me during his perfect family celebration. "Miranda." David's voice sounded strained and exhausted. "I need to talk to you about tonight." I could hear arguing in the background, raised voices, and what sounded like someone crying. "What is wrong?" I asked, stepping into my kitchen for privacy while my guests continued their warm conversation in the dining room. David sighed heavily. Everything is falling apart here. Jessica and Mark got into a huge fight about money right in front of everyone, including the kids. Mark accused Jessica of using him for his money while they were married, and Jessica screamed about how he owes her alimony. He can't pay because of his tax problems. The kids are crying, Mom is having some kind of breakdown, and Kyle showed up drunk and told everyone he dropped out of school. He paused and I could hear him walking away from the noise. Miranda, the whole evening has been a disaster. Everyone is miserable. Jessica left with the kids, Kyle passed out on the couch, and Mom has locked herself in her bedroom. Mark is still here, but he's just sitting alone eating pie and looking defeated. This is not what Christmas is supposed to be like. I listened to my brother describe the implosion of their perfect celebration, and instead of feeling vindicated or satisfied, I felt sad for all of them. They had worked so hard to create an image of success and happiness that they had forgotten what those things actually looked like. David, I said gently, I am having the most beautiful Christmas of my life. I could hear the surprise in his silence. I continued, I am surrounded by people who are real, who care about each other, who are not afraid to be vulnerable and honest. We are not competing or performing. We are just being together, and it is perfect. But, David started, and I could hear the confusion in his voice. You are not with family. Actually, I replied, looking back at my dining room where Mrs. Thompson was showing Maria and Lucy her engagement ring, while Jake and Tim were deep in conversation about baseball. I am with my family. I have just learned the difference between the family you are born into and the family you choose. The weeks following that Christmas Eve were like waking up from a long, confusing dream. For the first time in 8 months, I was not spending my energy worrying about what my family thought of my unemployment status or feeling ashamed about asking for small favors. Instead, I felt this incredible lightness, as if a weight I had not even realized I was carrying had been lifted from my shoulders. Mrs. Thompson and I began having dinner together twice a week. She told me stories about her 50-year marriage and her career as a teacher, while I helped her with technology and grocery shopping. Our friendship filled a loneliness in both of our lives that we had been carrying silently. She often said that having me in her life made her feel useful again, but the truth was that her wisdom and perspective were helping me see my own situation more clearly. Jake started stopping by regularly to talk about his struggles with missing his daughter and navigating his divorce. In helping him work through his emotions, I discovered that I was much stronger and more insightful than I had given myself credit for. His gratitude for my friendship reminded me that my value as a person had nothing to do with my employment status. Maria became like a younger sister to me. She was working so hard to build a better life while supporting her family back home, and her determination inspired me daily. When I helped her with her English homework and job applications, I remembered how much I enjoyed teaching and mentoring others. Tim and Lucy included me in their exploration of the city, and through their fresh perspective, I started seeing opportunities and possibilities that I had been too depressed to notice before. Their enthusiasm for their new life reminded me that starting over could be an adventure rather than a failure. About 2 weeks after Christmas, Jessica called me. Her voice was small and hesitant, so different from her usual confident tone. Miranda, I owe you an apology, she began, and I could tell she had been crying. I've been thinking about Christmas Eve, and I realized how wrong we were to exclude you. You were never the problem. We were all just so busy trying to look successful that we forgot what really mattered. She went on to tell me about her financial struggles, her demotion at work, and how she had been living with our mother while pretending to everyone else that she was thriving post-divorce. I was so jealous that you were handling your challenges with dignity while I was falling apart and lying about it, she admitted. Excluding you made me feel better about my own failures, and that was selfish and cruel. Kyle sent me a long text message a few days later explaining about dropping out of school and working fast food while lying to the family about his continued education. He wrote about the pressure he felt to live up to everyone's expectations, and how my exclusion from Christmas had made him realize how toxic the family's focus on appearances had become. He asked if we could meet for coffee, saying he needed someone to talk to who would not judge him for his mistakes. Even my mother eventually called, though it took her almost 3 weeks to work up the courage. Her voice was shaky as she tried to explain her reasoning for excluding me. I thought I was protecting the family's happiness, she said, but I realize now that I was just protecting my own image of what our family should look like. I was wrong, Miranda. Family is not about who has the most money or the best job. It is about loving each other through the hard times, and I failed at that completely. David continued to call regularly, often asking if he could bring takeout dinner over so we could talk. During one of these visits, he told me about his financial troubles and how maintaining his lifestyle was destroying his mental health. Watching you build real relationships while I was drowning in debt and pretending everything was fine made me realize how backwards my priorities had become, he said. You were the successful one all along. You just measured success differently than we did. While I listened to each family member's apologies and explanations, I felt compassion for their struggles, but I also felt something else, clarity. Their exclusion had forced me to examine what I really wanted from relationships and what I was willing to accept. I had learned that I would rather be alone than be conditionally loved, and I would rather build new connections than repair broken ones that were built on shallow foundations. My new life was not perfect, but it was authentic. The freelance marketing work I had started during my unemployment had grown into multiple client relationships and was providing better income than my previous corporate job. More importantly, it gave me flexibility to spend time with the people who mattered to me and to pursue activities that brought me genuine joy rather than just social status. I started volunteering at a local community center, teaching computer skills to older adults. Mrs. Thompson had suggested it after I helped her learn to video chat with her grandchildren. The work was incredibly fulfilling and led to connections with other volunteers who shared my values of service and community building. Through this volunteer work, I met David, a widower in his 60s, who had lost his wife the previous year, and Angela, a single mother who is trying to improve her job prospects through better computer skills. Our volunteer group began having monthly potluck dinners, and slowly a new kind of family formed around shared values rather than shared DNA. The Christmas experience had taught me that family is not something you are born into and must accept regardless of how you are treated. Family is something you can choose and build with people who celebrate your authentic self, support you through difficulties, and want to grow together rather than compete with each other. I learned that sometimes rejection is redirection, pointing you towards something better than what you thought you wanted. Being excluded from my family's Christmas had led me to create the most meaningful holiday celebration of my adult life, and introduced me to relationships that were deeper and more supportive than anything I'd experienced with my blood relatives. Most importantly, I discovered that my worth was not determined by external circumstances, like employment status, financial stability, or social approval. My worth came from my capacity to love, to support others, to create meaningful connections, and to maintain my integrity even when it was difficult. The family that had excluded me for being a loser had taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. Success is not about what you have or what others think of you. Success is about how you treat people, how you handle adversity, and whether you choose love over fear when making decisions about who deserves your time and energy. Sometimes the best Christmas gift is the family that does not invite you because it forces you to find the family that actually wants you there. Have you ever experienced rejection that ended up being a blessing in disguise? Have you had to choose between being accepted for who others want you to be versus being loved for who you really are? Share your thoughts in the comments below because your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Please give this video a like if it reminded you that your worth is not determined by other people's opinions, and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Share this with anyone who might need a reminder that sometimes the best families are the ones we choose for ourselves. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope this holiday season brings you the gift of authentic connections and unconditional love. Remember that you deserve to be celebrated exactly as you are, and anyone who cannot see your value does not deserve a place at your table.